Good morning and welcome to Daybreak Live on Dominion Television, Ibadan. I am Samson Balogun. Our first conversation this morning turns to South Africa, where concerns over xenophobic attacks have once again put safety of Nigerians and other African migrants in focus. The Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Nidcom, is urging South African authorities to step up protection and prevent further violence. It is a familiar crisis, but one that keeps returning with serious consequences. What does this mean for diplomatic relations, migrant safety, and Africa's promise of unity across borders? That is our Daybreak gist this morning. We'll also bring you the weather report and the latest Daybreak news, keeping you informed on the stories shaping the country and the wider world.
As the morning unfolds, we turn to the newspaper headlines where today's front pages reflect the country's political mood, economic realities, and the issues competing for public attention. We'll take you through the key headlines and what they tell us about the moment Nigeria is in. Then our attention shifts to the politics of 2027 with our big story, a head start to 2027, what Tinubu's second-term declaration means for opposition and governance. When a sitting president signals second-term intentions this early, it changes the political temperature. Does it strengthen policy focus through continuity, or does it put governance into campaign mode sooner than expected? Joining us for that conversation is Honorable Molaja Olaoye.
And before we leave you this morning, we turn our attention to Trend Watch. We bring together the stories, reactions, and conversations shaping public opinion across the country.
The headlines are moving really fast as we progress.
Yes, and the political clock is already ticking.
This is Daybreak Live. Please stay with us this morning.
Right. You stay with us as we have a lot to discuss this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning,
Samson. It's really nice to be here once again. And this is actually one conversation that catches the attention of everyone, especially Nigerians abroad, and even some in Nigeria, and also Nidcom, under the leadership of Daybreak. This is something that, it's a familiar story. It's a familiar issue that really has not been attended to the way it should be. According to the pact between African countries, there is a promise of safety of other Africans across borders. But unfortunately, it is not looking like that in some places, especially in South Africa. This is not the first time that we are having issues of xenophobic attacks on Nigerians and citizens of other African countries who reside or are domiciled in South Africa. The most troubling part of it is that lately we have been seeing clips and about some South Africans who belong to no authority. I mean, they do not work with any authority in South Africa, not even the immigration or the police, walking up to fellow Africans and asking them what they are doing in South Africa and why they are doing the business they are doing, if they have permits or licenses to do their businesses. That, for me, has reached its height. And someone somewhere in South Africa should really call this, what it is. I mean, call a spade and address it once and for all.
Right. I think you're very spot on. And I think about a few weeks back, we talked about a particular airline, speaking about Zimbabwe now, that some Nigerians were arrested unfairly in Zimbabwe and that they were treated in a manner that is not so good at all compared to other people that were arrested that belong to other countries. And then they were arrested for days, and then Madam Abike, had to write to the authorities to say that, no, do not keep them in your custody for no reason. If at all they have done something, charge them to court and let them plead their case. And then, so moving away from that, now talking about, South Africa, just like you mentioned, this is not the first time that something like this is happening. And I remember that I think I talked about a topic on this set a few days back, and I was asking my guest the question to see that why is it that Nigeria, that has done so much for so many of those African countries at a time, why are they treating Nigerians like that in their countries? Because if you look at Nigeria served that, or let me say, was held that position of the big brother rule at a time, especially looking at the fact that Nigeria got independence before some other countries. They helped other countries get independence. There was this Africanness, this colonial solidarity quite a number of help that they give out to all these African countries, and it appears that African countries are, let me say, Nigerians are not treated so fairly in these countries. They will even give special treatment to other people from other African countries compared to Nigerians. And then the only saving grace for Nigerians right now and other countries is the fact that Nigerians are smart, Nigerians are brilliant, and then so there's nothing you can do about it. Wherever Nigerians get to, they find a way to stand out. I was making reference to a particular guy, a young guy in the UK who is a doctor, a resident doctor. When they were giving out awards on the day of the award, he cleared all the 8 residential awards. He was able to do quite a number of things. So that's the only thing that is saving Nigerians now. And then I don't know what I think I've been hearing from her. Nothing. Whenever anything like this happens, she will always come out to talk about it, to say, what are you doing? What are you guys doing about it? You don't deserve to treat Nigerians this way. And I think it's a good one coming from her. It's just that we need to put in more effort, because at the end of the day, Nigeria is a good country, whether you like it or not, even though there are issues in this country. And I think that those issues, we have them in other countries as well. Nigeria is a sovereign country, and this same country has been good to this country, especially South Africa, especially Zimbabwe, Ghana, Angola, mention all of those countries. There was even a time that President Obasanjo gave out cash money to some of these African countries just to support them in terms of when they were, especially when some of these countries were going through civil war. Talk about Zimbabwe. Nigeria was instrumental into helping this country to actually come out of civil war, to get their independence and support them even afterwards. I'm sure some of us are even aware that Nigeria even gave some of this country access to light. So we have been good to our neighboring countries, but then we don't get the same response, or we don't get the same treatment. And it speaks to the fact that, okay, maybe some of them have complained bitterly that you find Nigerians go to other countries and commit all sorts of atrocities. I mean, that is very fair, because I mean, even the Zimbabwe country now, I think I read a particular story that sometimes some drug barriers, Brazilian drug barriers, were found alongside some Nigerians. So these issues happen, and I think it happens everywhere too. In this same country, you've seen other people, other members of other countries come to this country and commit a lot of atrocities too. Talk about China. At some point, some of them were arrested recently. So it happens everywhere. So we need to do so much to improve the image of Nigeria in other countries, basically.
Well, day before yesterday, I think a day before that, there was a particular clip of some South Africans who walked up to some businesses, having conversations with them, and talking about the fact that, yes, we know you have businesses in South Africa. You have established these businesses to boost our economy. But what we want you to do for us is to stop employing fellow Africans. You should only employ South Africans. And that now brings us to the issue of the economy generally. We spoke about the fact that the Lagos economy is bigger than some economies in Africa, including that of South Africa. So if we now have to put this side by side with what is currently going on, I think Nigerians think Nigeria is the worst country in the world. But, well, that is not true. Because according to what I can deduce from what is going on here, is that even South Africans are feeling the heat of unemployment. They are feeling the heat of the fact that security in their country has been a little bit shaky when it comes to gang shootings and some other things like that. And you have to look at how this has been addressed by South Africans themselves and not the government now. I can see that there is a lot going on within the South African system. And the citizens felt like they could actually address that themselves. And if it has now gotten to the stage where many jobs that used to be for foreigners is now being fought for by South Africans themselves. Look at the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, and some other countries like that across the world, especially in Asia. There is an arrangement, right, that some South Africans do not do some things. I mean, some Asians, there are some jobs they do not do. They actually bring in some, foreigners to come do it because there's an arrangement for their citizens. There used to be a time it happened like that in South Africa that they really did not care about these menial jobs, plumbing and some mechanic works and some other things like that. But now that they are fighting for this, it's not really about how they are fighting it anymore. It's about what is happening within the country that is making them, look for avenues to send foreigners away from their country. And that also begs the question of how do you react when you find yourself in other countries? Okay, you have gotten to maybe, for example, you have gotten to South Africa. Are you really representing Nigeria well? Because when you check databases of Nigerians who are in prisons in some countries, you will be really ashamed. Ghana, for example, go and check. You will mention names, hundreds of Nigerians in prisons in Ghana, and you'll be looking at what exactly happened. Is it immigration issue, or was it that they got in there legally and they started committing crimes? Because if you cannot do it right at home, there is no way you'll be able to do it right in another person's country. And we have always said this, that, look, there are things you can... I wrote an article day before yesterday that if, for example, you complain about Nigeria about almost everything, even if your doors are not properly locked in your home, you complain about it. If you have stomachache, you complain that it's the government's fault. But most Nigerians cannot survive in a sane situation, in a sane country, where everything works. Most Nigerians cannot survive where the rule of law is actually in play. Look at, for example, some Nigerians who get abroad, work diligently, get their monies, and then come to Nigeria and then open their shirts, open the roof, start blasting, and then driving against traffic, doing all sorts of things. Things they cannot originally do where they are coming from. But Nigeria is a place where you can actually do all of that. If you now get to a country where they say, look, this cannot be done in our country, then it's a problem. So we really need to look at how Nigerians are representing Nigeria in other countries too. Yes, they might be reacting to it in a very wrong way. I mean, attacking fellow Africans. I mean, if you are doing that to Africans, what would you do to other, citizens of other countries? And I can say, for example, that they are not really talking about Chinese in their country. They are not talking about Indians in their country. They are really talking about fellow Africans, like the Nigerians, Ghanaians, and some other people in their country. Why Africans and not other people? And that's a question that really needs to be answered.
Yes, and then just like I mentioned, that even that Zimbabwe case that happened a few weeks back, that a particular media house reported that some drug barons were found alongside some Nigerians and that they were arrested. So it speaks to the fact that even as a country, Nigerians themselves, we must portray ourselves well. So we should not just depend on the authorities to come to our rescue when you go to other countries and commit all sorts of atrocities. It doesn't make sense, because at the end of the day, you're a representative of your country. One of my lecturers said something that the first time he traveled to UK, it was a particular area where it was majorly dominated by the whites. He said when he got there and he was just he just said, I just came out to just check the atmosphere and check the buildings. He said somebody from his room up just called him and said, what are you doing in my area? Because the man was surprised. Why are you walking? Why are you just walking? Where are you going? And so these people are so concerned. And then he said that might not have happened if he's like a white person, if he's not a black person. So it speaks to the issues on ground, the kind of experience that these people have with some Nigerians are terrible. I tell you, a friend of mine traveled recently out of the country. I don't really remember the country now. He said the first person he met in that country is a Nigerian, and that person duped him. No, does that make sense to you? In Nigeria, not even in another country, that person duped him, and the person is a Nigerian.
This kind of thing.
Kind of thing. It doesn't make any sense. So the person is saying he has experienced something like that in Nigeria before, but he didn't expect that something like that would still happen to him outside of Nigeria. In this country, I think about a few years ago, a particular man that belongs to a country, a Western country, established a restaurant in this country. And he said that he doesn't want other people to come to the restaurant except for people who are of the same nation with him. And the people were asking him, in this same country, why not take that restaurant to your country if you don't want other people to patronize you? So these are the issues that we have on ground. And I think Nigerians themselves, we can actually start, this. If you want it to get better, if you want people to treat you better in other countries, we need to start, behaving well, basically.
Okay. You see, when it comes to the issue of doing the right thing, when it comes to the issue of being able to separate race from religion and some other things like that, Africans used to be the best place to do it. They used to be the best set of people that understood the assignment. But unfortunately, over the years, this has further, disintegrated the African nations. Now, there used to be a time where, African countries were big brothers to some other African countries. They were playing big brother roles. In fact, they would give money, they would send mercenaries, the military personnel to go there, restore peace and do all sorts of things like that. Nigeria was at the forefront of all of that. I could remember the time of ECOMOG and some other things. Just recently, in Benin Republic, there was meant to be a takeover by the military. Nigeria swung into action, got it sorted out, and some other areas like that. South Africa, for example, should be one of the countries that is really indebted to Nigeria as a country. I was watching a video of Winnie Mandela yesterday, and she mentioned, for about 5 minutes of her speech, she was busy talking about Nigeria and talking about how Nigeria played that big brother role when they really needed an African country to actually help them out during the time of apartheid. But if it now gets to this stage where Africans are hating on fellow Africans, Africans don't want fellow Africans to be, in South Africa and some other African countries, then the question is, we are talking about having a unified currency. Okay, there was a time when, I think that was during the time of Muammar Gaddafi, who said, look, as Africans, just like a euro can be spent in, in any European nation, let's look for a currency that can also unify us as a continent. And that could not really see the light of the day. They were also talking about having a passport that cuts across every African country. With that, you can enter or get into every African country without being stopped or being checked for, illegal migration. But unfortunately, I don't think that will work now. When at a time like this, some are already saying, look, we don't want you in our country. So if you now have that kind of passport and you still have some hindrances in getting to some countries, then why do you have it? So it boils down to the fact that Africans are not ready to be liberated. Okay, I think we are still thinking like we are still yet to be colonized. So it's a really, really sad situation that this is happening, and I really do feel like African leaders should sit down, have a discussion about this. This is not the first time actually. And then what happens to the bilateral agreements between all these countries if we now have to go through this route again? At least there were pacts signed by them years ago. Is it time for it to be renewed? Must we now look into our immigration and migration laws to see exactly what we can do to make sure we stop this before it gets out of hand, and then some of them they start getting themselves killed across the country?
Yes, I think those parts were signed many years back, but the problem is that, you see, those leaders, many of them are passed, and then other people have been able to become the president of those countries. So one problem I'm seeing between African leaders is that they lack the ability to maintain relationships. So when you see that the president leaves, and then that president has good relationship with the current president, when the administration is when they are done with the administration and other people come in, it's difficult for some of these people to maintain the relationship that was in existence, when those people were there. And then it also reflects, even with African leaders and Western leaders, you see that it takes a lot to actually maintain that relationship or even bring it back at all. So it's a problem. I remember recently a particular African leader was apologizing for saying that Nigerians cannot speak good English. I don't know whether you saw that video. I saw the video. So you see that it's difficult to even have good relationship.
I was trying to twist and turn what he said.
Don't forget the turbulence, or let me say the chaos on Twitter between Nigerians and Ghana. We always argue about a lot of things, and the leaders are saying all of these things. So it doesn't make any sense to me. I think you should start from working on the relationship between the leaders, because when the likes of OPJ was in power, I mentioned to you, he had a good relationship, with the leader of South Africa, Ghana, mentioned all of these names. So he was even able to help them. I mentioned that he gave them a cash reward at some point just to support them, because of what they were going through at the time. So we need to go back to that. We need to maintain relationship with the past leaders and even the present leaders. I think that's a good way to go, because at the end of the day, you can't do it alone. Aristotle says something: any man who says he can stand alone is either a beast or a god. You need people at some point in your life. It doesn't matter. Yes, Nigeria is blessed with natural resources, but we are still struggling with a lot of things. So we still need to liaise with other African countries to see how they can help us, even down to insecurity. It's not just about our people who live there alone, down to insecurity, because at the time, I remember, Nigeria was instrumental to helping some neighboring African countries solve insecurity. What are these people doing to help us? I mentioned something, a writer wrote something. He said Nigeria should stop being the Santa Claus of Africa. That when other people are in trouble, Nigeria is so swift in helping them. Remember what happened in Benin? You remember that we were quick to send them troops and things like that just to help them quell the coup. But then we have seen several issues in this country. How many African countries have been able to help us in the last 5 years when we were going through issues? How many have supported us in terms of insecurity? But if it's Nigeria, we forget our own problems and then we help them. Some people have even called us the Good Samaritan country, basically.
Well, I think there are ways to go about this and then to put this to an end totally. I think South Africans should begin, or maybe all Africans should begin to teach their children tolerance early, especially in schools. I mean, these things would help a lot, especially, you know, you can't just start acting this kind of way if you have not actually had that in mind before now. It doesn't start overnight. It's something that, especially when you don't teach history, you don't know your own history, you begin to do some things, and then at the end of the day, someone will tell you, oh, look, if you are truly a student of history, you should know better. And I don't think most South Africans right now, well, in most countries, youth carry about 50 to 60 or thereabout, or roughly over 60% of the population. So if you now look back in history, you would understand the fact that most of them, or some of them, did not witness what happened, they did not witness apartheid, or did not read about it. So they should begin to teach them tolerance. And also, there should be something we call positive interaction. Okay, as fellow Africans, yes, you might say, oh, I'm in South Africa today, I'm a South African, I don't plan to leave, and then someday you have a reason to be in Nigeria too. So do you expect to be treated the same way you are treating Nigerians, Ugandans, and some other fellow African nationals you have found in your country today? So these are areas we should look at. Then there are issues of false narratives out there. Okay, the social media has so much allowed people to peddle so much lies that you can't even tell the truth. There are so many deepfake videos online that you cannot really tell the difference unless you are a pro. And when you now see all of this, you begin to react, and you don't even know you are reacting based on lies you have been told by some people. And I really think that's the area where the government really needs to come in. There should be a level of regulation to all of these things, especially the issue of social media. I'm really scared that this might be the reason that we have another world war, because so many people really cannot tell the difference between deepfake and original. And when you now react based on what you have seen on social media, that you cannot really tell the difference, then there is a problem. So there should be a level of regulation to how we spread deep fake videos, especially some social media influencers who are looking for clicks, and then they put headlines out there, and the moment some people don't even read the body of the story, when they have gotten the headline, they are, of course, they don't care about the rest of the story. So headlines that look more like clickbaits than actual truth, they can actually set the country on fire if one is not careful. So the government should look into some of these things. I think there should be a level of regulation to these things you are doing, and leaders should also be held accountable. Okay, most of these leaders, I mean, if a leader can come out to say some people from one country do not know how to speak good English, that shows how reckless some leaders can be when it comes to speaking, and how carefree they are when it comes to sensitive issues. I mean, look at how some issues as baseless as jollof rice set up some, Ghana and Nigeria set them up for dragging on social media. And football too, set them up for dragging on social media. Eventually, some will say, oh, we won them. The other will say, we actually won in the...
Down to music and artists. Down to music.
So it tells you how competitive, Africans can be. So if you now come out to say, as a leader, you come out to, make some baseless accusations, or maybe now come out to raise some unnecessary dust, you don't know how these people will react. And when they react, you might not really, I mean, look at what he said when he was trying to defend what he said. He said, I hope this has not raised so many eyebrows in Nigeria, because he also monitors the social media and saw how Nigerians reacted to all of that. I mean, a country that has a kind of violation in kind, you say they don't know how to speak good English. That tells you how reckless some leaders can be, and they really need to be accountable for what they do, and they should be careful of what they put out there. So the South African president is... one I want to talk to you directly this morning. You really have to nip this in the bud before it gets out of hand. There was a time where, the last time this happened, it resulted in a lot of deaths. And if this gets out of hand and gets to, violence level, then you know how many people will lose their lives because of this. So this is the reason why it should be stopped now before it gets out of hand.
Right, and to add to that, I remember when Tyler won a particular award, it was won on Twitter, and while some Nigerians are saying, what is she singing? And I remember even the artists in the same category with her even congratulated her. They were not, bitter about
Nigerians
it.
dragged her.
But Nigerians dragged for days on Twitter. It doesn't make any sense to me. And then beyond that, I think Nigeria is a very accommodating country, and that speaks to how people are eager to come down to Nigeria.
Right.
So beyond what some Nigerians are committing outside of here, when they go to other countries, when some of these Western people also come down to Nigeria, they see a lot of things that are so wrong. I remember there was a time a Russian writer came to Nigeria, and then he made a video and said they were asking him to pay money. Or when he was in the cab, they were asking the drivers to pay money. He said the driver kept paying 200 here, 500 here, and he could not, understand what was going on.
Why he was paying them so much?
It's a problem, and it's not the first person. Imagine the millions of people that watched that video. So we also need to do better, even things that are going on in the country beyond what some Nigerians are committing outside of this place. If we can actually work on, those sides, I think things will get better, basically.
All right, it's a fine place to leave that conversation this morning. We say thank you for being a part of the show so far. It is time for us to take further report on the show this morning.